Well, good morning. Happy Father's Day to all of you. And I echo what Mike said. Happy Father's Day to the influencers in our lives. I know that many of you have learned that it doesn't actually take someone to be your biological father to be the father to you that you need. And for those of you that maybe have that situation in your life, I hope and my prayer is that here at Bethel you have a lot of dads. A lot of men that speak truth and love into your life, and that when you come, you feel that reflection of our Father, our God's love, in your life in a very practical way. So thank you for taking time today to come share with us, join us in our celebrations this morning. And if you're our guest this morning, I just want to say welcome to you and thank you for choosing to take up your time on Sunday and spend it with us. And I'll encourage all of you, as Mike already did, if you would use that communication card in the worship guide in the seat in front of you, just as a way to let us know what God is doing in your life, what's going on in your heart, the good and the bad, the questions and the comments, whatever it might be. We really value your feedback and your input in just what God has put on your heart and in your mind. And so please utilize those cards, all of you. And then when we receive the morning's offering at the end, we'll pass by some baskets and you can put the cards in there. And if you're our guest today, that's all we're going to ask that you give. Just a way for us to connect with you and hear from you. Because it makes a huge difference for us as pastors. And like Mike said, when you leave, I'll spoil it. We have candy bars for you, all the men. But you knew that because we do candy bars every year. So when you leave, men, just grab a candy bar. Don't turn it down. There's no reason not to, you know. That's our gift to you, just as a celebration of the role that God has given men in the lives of others. And so we just want to celebrate that and thank you all for being influencers in life. We're going through a series in the book of Proverbs, and we're not doing it every single verse. We're kind of moving through it at a faster pace than you would if you did all 31 chapters, because that would take us a very long time. But hopefully you've been enjoying just a look at some of these different, more practical advice, suggestions that the book of Proverbs gives us. This morning we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 11, 22. I'm going to warn you now, if you turn there and get ready for this, you're going to be a little confused, and we'll get to it when you read the verse. But if Proverbs 11, 22 is where we're going to be. If you grabbed one of the tan Bibles in the back, it's on page 831, and if you grab one of the brown Bibles, it's on page 550. And so you can kind of turn there to prepare just to see where we're going. But we've been talking over the last few weeks with the help of this book, the book of Proverbs, about how to be better at life, how to navigate life in a successful way. And specifically as Christians, that means how do you navigate life and its situations and its complexities? How do you do that in a godly way? That's what it means for Christians. How do we handle every situation that comes in a way that honors God the most? And we can all, we've talked about this, we can all get better at this. If you think you have the godly life down, that you're set in life, then I'd probably say that you're living a proud man's delusion. There's no way that any of us have this all figured out, and that's why we have the Bible. That's why we have books like this to remind us and help us and teach us. So this book and its advice is for all of us. It's practical. It's applicable, it's memorable, and what we've been learning over this last month is that the successful godly life, first and foremost, is possible. It is possible to live life despite complexities and situations and curveballs that are thrown. It's possible to live life in a godly, successful way. That starts, though, with the fear of God. And you've heard that phrase now every week that we've been talking about this, the fear of God, that reverence and awe for God's character and God's nature, especially when you compare it to my character and my nature. That God is everything I am not. He is more than me. He is more significant than me, more powerful than me, more knowledgeable than me. But He also relates to me. Even though I am not like Him, He still comes close and near to me and relates to me. And the godly life isn't possible if we don't know and come to God on His terms, in light of who He is, with that belief deep in the core of our being. If we don't do that, then the godly life isn't going to be a possibility for us. Some of the keys to navigating life in a successful way, in a godly way, as we've seen, are don't trust yourself. You can't trust yourself. You can always trust God, though. When it comes to decisions and situations in life, you can't trust yourself. Your logic is fundamentally flawed by sin, but you can always trust God. You can always count on His truth to always be true. So don't trust yourself. God is not flawed by sin. Trust Him. And then we saw that God's discipline, His training, His correction, it's not meant to punish us. It's meant to prepare us and lead us towards God's best, because He loves us. And so because He loves us, then He trains us and He corrects us. He disciplines us. And so we should accept that discipline and seize that opportunity to grow and look at it as, I'm so glad He's still working on me. And last week we saw that time is a gift from God, that living a successful, godly life has a lot to do with seeing time as a gift, and that we shouldn't waste our time on laziness, but we should spend our time on letting the gospel change us and letting the gospel change the people around us. And this week we're going to see that living the godly life successfully has a lot to do with authenticity. It has a lot to do with authenticity. And our advice today is going to come from Proverbs chapter 11:22. And I'm going to warn you, if you've already read it, this is more of a blunt verse than we're used to, and it's more unusual than we're used to. It's definitely not a verse you've probably heard on Father's Day, and you probably won't hear it again on Father's Day, but it's definitely more memorable than other verses that you're used to in the Bible, and I'm hoping that's a good thing, that this sticks with you. And I'll say this too, despite its appearance, this verse is for all of us. And so Proverbs chapter 11 verse 22 says, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. So this isn't a coffee mug kind of verse, right? Hobby Lobby isn't putting this on a mug and then selling it, telling you it's 70% off, which is not, but telling you it's 70% off and selling it to you so you can give this to your wife on Mother's Day. This is not your typical go-to kind of verse. But I want to be clear on something. This verse is not a chauvinistic weapon. So if you leave thinking, I'm going to tell my wife this about makeup, that's what I'm doing with this verse. That's not what it's for. It's not meant to condemn women who wear makeup or want to look pretty. That's not at all what this verse is talking about. So we want to get to the point of this and see what's going on here. The point of verse 22 is to give you an incredibly vivid word picture, an image, so that you remember the truth of this proverb. It's meant to give you a mental image so you remember what the truth behind this is. And so imagine the word picture for a moment. A gold ring in a pig's snout. You're meant to imagine that and picture that in your mind. The choice of animal for this proverb is not a mistake. For Solomon, the choice of the animal is important. Just from our standpoint, and I know I'm not a farmer, we've talked about this last week, I'm not into agriculture at all, but pigs are gross. When you go to the county fairs or the state fairs or whatever, pigs are the ones I tend to skip over because they just weird me out with well, I won't even get into the details of it, but they're gross, and they eat slop, they wallow in mud, and they're just not pleasant to most of us. If you love pigs, you're a special person. Now, the product of pigs, that's a different story, right? I love bacon. But pigs are not exactly the most pleasant of animals. I was actually trying to think of what's a grosser animal, just in the way it lives, that we eat. And I really couldn't think of another animal that's more gross, unless it's like a bottom feeder fish. I had a hard time coming up with a grosser animal. But for Solomon and the people of Israel, the pig was the most disgusting animal alive. It was the most disgusting animal alive. First of all, the reason being was that a pig wasn't kosher. Kosher is a word that means clean to eat for the Hebrews. In Leviticus, God gave the people of Israel very specific dietary rules. Leviticus 11 verses 3 and 4 kind of lays out the baseline standard for which animals are approved and not approved. And the approved meat is an animal that has to have a split hoof and it has to chew its cud. Those are the two rules Don't ask me why those are the two rules, but for whatever reason, that was the easiest way to explain it. And so if you're going to eat the meat, it had to have a split hoof and chew its cud. And if it only meets one of those conditions, it's not a kosher animal. So Leviticus 11:7-8 applies this to the pig. And it says the pig, though it has a divided hoof, it doesn't chew the cud, and so it's unclean for you. You must not eat their meat or touch the carcasses because they're unclean. So this is where they get the rule that you can't eat a pig, and the reason is because it doesn't have a split hoof and chew its cud. And so they're not kosher. The Jews could not eat pig. Not only that, but they couldn't even touch a dead, you see it there, you can't even touch a dead, unkosher animal, which means you can't use the skin for leather either. You just can't touch it. There were other animals that fit into this category, like horses, but as long as you're not using the dead horse and touching the dead horse, they had horses. But for a pig, though, there was really nothing desirable about it. The pig specifically drew the disgust of Jewish people. They hated the pig. They felt that the pig, even more so, the pig itself as an animal represented loathing. It represented hypocrisy, which sounds kind of weird, but whenever they saw the pig, they actually thought hypocrite. You actor, you liar, and they loathed the pig because it was a lazy animal, and when it would lay down, if you ever see pigs lay down, oftentimes it looks like they just fell over and their legs are super straight, right? But when they would lay down, the Jews would look at that, and it appeared to them like the pig was trying to demonstrate, look, no, I'm kosher, because it was sticking its split hoof out there, when in reality it's not. And so they actually felt that even in laying down in its relaxing moments, the pig was lying to them. That you want to look kosher, but you're not kosher. See, look at my hoof. And so they were disgusted with the pig. And the Talmud, which is the recorded oral tradition of Jewish practice and custom and interpretation, the Talmud records that the Jews, taking their kosher law in the case of the pig to the extreme, the Jews would not even raise pigs. When Jesus cast demons into pigs in the New Testament, the people raising those pigs are not Jews. The Jews wouldn't even come close to them. They wouldn't raise them. They didn't want to be involved with them. They hated and despised pigs. In fact, many Jews, I thought this was really interesting, many Jews wouldn't even say the name chazir, which is pig or swine, in Hebrew. They would call it another thing. They didn't even want to say its name out loud, because they despised the pig so much, they wouldn't even say the name, unless they intended to give an insult. And if they wanted to insult someone because they never said that name, then the worst insult you could give someone is to call them a pig. Which is, in fact, in Proverbs 11:22, exactly what Solomon is doing. Because he's using the Hebrew word for pig, he's using the word shazir. With our proverb, this is meant to be, in a way, it's meant to be offensive. It's meant to be insulting, to have this image in your mind. It's meant to be disgusting. It's meant to be unthinkable. The idea that someone would put a gold ring in the snout of a pig. Why would you do that? And more than that, a nose ring in their culture was a beautiful, fancy, special adornment in ancient Israel. When Isaac, of the old Jewish family, when Isaac sent his servant Eliezer to find him his wife, Isaac eventually married Rebekah, and when he sent his servant to go find him a wife, and Eliezer found Rebekah, as an engagement gift from Isaac, Eliezer gave her a gold nose ring. In Genesis 24. Without saying a word, the man watched her, that's Eliezer, he watched Rebekah closely to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful, meaning is she the one that Isaac's supposed to marry? When the camels had finished drinking, she was watering camels, Eliezer, the man, took out a gold nose ring weighing a beka and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels, and he ends up giving them to her, saying, here's your engagement gift. And this is like the most beautiful engagement gift he can think of, which would be odd for us today, right? In our culture, that's not our go-to gift, right? Here's a nose ring. Put that in there. We'll just pierce it right now. But it was the most beautiful, fancy, special adornment they could think of. When God talks through the prophet Ezekiel and he describes his affection for Israel, he describes it like a groom giving his bride the best gifts, and in the gifts it includes a nose ring. Ezekiel chapter 16, God is saying, I adorned you with jewelry. I put bracelets on your arms and a necklace around your neck, and I put a ring on your nose, earrings on your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. Where God is saying, like a groom, I loved Israel. I gave you the best engagement gifts I could give to a bride. I gave you a nose ring. Nose rings were the fanciest jewelry in ancient Israel, and Solomon here is describing a disgusting, detestable pig with a nose ring. And he almost crassly says that a woman who is beautiful but lacks discretion, which is sound judgment, behavior, taste, intelligence, understanding, they're a pig with a nose ring. So how does this help all of us? How does this help all of us live a successful, godly life? How does this help us navigate life in a godly way? I'll say this, if we want to live a successful, godly life, that means that we must choose, we must decide, we must commit to be authentic rather than to appear impressive. If we want to live a successful, godly life, then we must choose that we're going to be authentic rather than to appear impressive, which is the heart of the issue with what Solomon's describing, is that they're trying to make something appear impressive, but really in reality, it's not authentic. It's a fake, it's a pretender, it's disgusting inside. And if we want to live that godly life, then we need to choose to be authentic rather than choose to appear impressive. Solomon's point is that the outside, what's outside should match what's inside. And his example is a beautiful woman who has the worst judgment. A beautiful woman that has the worst judgment, the idea being that she works on her beauty to hide her inner flaws. She works on what's outside to hide what's inside, but that truth, that what's outside and what appears impressive can hide what isn't authentic, what's inside is disgusting, that truth applies to all of us. The truth is that what is more important is not that the outside looks beautiful, or that the outside puts on a good show, or that the outside is all put together in the eyes of everyone else around us. But what's important is if the inside is disgusting, then that would be like putting a gold ring on a pig's snout. What is important is not dressing up the outside of the pig, but what is inside is important. The character, the quality, it's important. What's inside is that it's good. So who you are is more important than how you appear to other people. Who you are inside is more important than how you appear to other people. And so we have a choice. We can choose. Every day we have a choice. We can choose to be authentic, or we can choose to appear impressive. If we want to live a godly life, then we have to choose to be rather than to appear. Now, it's easier to choose to appear impressive. It's easier to choose to put on a good show and put on a good front for everyone else around us, including ourselves. It's easier to do that, and it's harder, it's more work, but it's better to be authentic and choose to be authentic. The first number of years I spent teaching here at the school, I taught. I've talked about this. I taught elementary PE, and I taught high school PE. Like I did all the gym classes. And one of the things that you learn very quickly, and that you have to counsel young boys in, is that their sweat smells, and it begins to smell pretty poorly, and we only have a very small room for them to change in, and so they change in the bathroom over here. And so the solution for junior high boys, and some of us went through this phase, is they make body spray, and the idea is that the more body spray that you put on, the less of your body that you smell. And so they just let it loose in there. And sometimes you walk into that bathroom and it is hard to breathe because they have just sprayed and sprayed and sprayed, realizing that, I am gross. And so they call it an Italian shower, right? You just put cologne on. You put cologne on, and that makes everything better. And because they want to appear as though I'm not this gross, disgusting junior high boy. And so they spray as much as they possibly can instead of taking a shower, instead of actually cleaning it. Granted, they don't have a shower here, but it's easier to do that than to address the problem. And whenever I would talk to the younger kids, I would always just say, look, some of you are going to have to admittedly take 2 showers a day. Let's just be honest. That's how it's going to have to work. Stop with the axe and start with the showers. That's how this goes. But it's easier to choose to appear impressive. It's easier to do that than to address the actual issues. It's easier to choose to appear impressive than to actually be authentic and work on who you are. I don't know what your struggle is. I don't know what it is that you don't want people to notice about you or see about you, or what you struggle with feeling inadequate in. But we all struggle with wanting to appear impressive. We all struggle with that. But the desire to appear impressive, but without godly authenticity, the desire to just appear that's not matched by what's inside, will lead us away from a successful godly life. It will steal our effort, and it'll steal our time. It'll steal even our joy, because our effort will be spent on making what's outside, making the trivial, the superficial look good. And while we spend time on appearing impressive, it will lead us away, and what's inside becomes more and more and more disgusting, which means we're going to put more work in appearing impressive, while further and further and further we become more disgusting and farther from godliness. I want you to see the condemnations that Jesus gives this approach to life, appearing impressive but not really being authentically godly. In Matthew chapter 23, verses 27 and 28, he's addressing religious people, and he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites." He could have said pigs. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside you're full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and full of wickedness. He levels this criticism on these Jews in his day who they put a lot of effort in appearing religious and appearing impressive in their culture, but they lack authentic godliness, and he's disheartened when he sees it. He's devastated when he sees it. And he gives this criticism to a church in Sardis, Turkey. Later on in Revelation, he says this. He says to this church, he says, "I know your deeds. You have the reputation, you appear impressive. You have a reputation of being alive, but inside you're dead. So wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. For I found your deeds unfinished in the sight of my God. Remember, therefore, what you have received and heard, hold it fast and repent. Turn away from your appearances of impressiveness and turn towards being authentically godly. There's still time." The choice to be authentic rather than to appear impressive will lead us to a godly life when we choose that. And at the heart of this choice, at the heart of the choice to be authentic rather than appear impressive, is this question: who are you focusing on pleasing in life? Who are you focusing on pleasing in life? This is really the heart of that choice. Who am I focusing on pleasing in life? And in Galatians chapter 1, Paul writes that there is, in a sense, a pressure when it comes to specifically preaching and shepherding. There's a pressure to tell people what they want to hear, but not necessarily what God needs them to hear. And he warns Timothy. Timothy's his protege of this later in a letter that he writes to him, that there's this desire, there's this tension that you're going to want to appear impressive to people rather than just be authentic. And there's this pressure to impress. There's a pressure for pastors to impress people with happy-go-lucky teaching, rather than to be authentic with the message that God wants to be preached. And he tells Timothy, you can't do that. You've got to be authentic. Don't appear impressive. And he summarizes this issue in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. where he says, in all of this, about preaching the gospel, I could appear impressive or I can be authentic, but am I going to try to win the approval of human beings or of God? Am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, then I would not be a servant of Christ. There is a tension for Paul. For all of us, there is this tension between pleasing God and pleasing men. Who are you focusing on pleasing in life? Who we focus on is at the heart of that choice to be authentic or to appear impressive. Am I going to please God or am I going to please man? That's at the heart of whether or not we're going to be authentically godly or appear impressive to everyone else around us or even ourselves. And Paul says in that verse in Galatians 1:10, if you are choosing to please people, then you're choosing not to please God. If you're choosing to please people, you're choosing not to please God, then you're not a servant of Christ. You're a servant of everyone else but Christ. If your life is focused on pleasing people, then you will inevitably choose to appear impressive. But you will fail to develop authentic godliness in your life because you're more worried about pleasing people than you are God. And your life will be consumed with the effort of dressing up a pig and trying to pretend it's not gross. But if your life is focused on pleasing God, then you will gradually become more and more authentic. And you will have no need to appear impressive because your authenticity and that godliness will come through, and you won't have any need to appear impressive to other people. Your life will be consumed with authentic godliness, and that's okay if my life is consumed with pleasing God and not people. If we're going to be authentic, which is necessary for a successful godly life, then we need to embrace the truth, this truth, that what God thinks is more important than what people think. What God thinks of you and your decisions is more important than what people think. Pleasing God with your life, with your decision, with your heart is more important than pleasing people. Authenticity is rooted in how much we value the approval of God. The more that we value God's approval, the less that we will try to appear impressive to other people because pleasing them won't matter to us, which means we'll be more authentic, which is necessary for that life of godliness. For some of us, this is really good news because you maybe have spent your whole life trying to please someone who is unpleasable. And on Father's Day, maybe you feel frustration because you've never been able to please your dad. You've never been able to meet his expectations and his standards. Or maybe it's not a dad, maybe it's a mom or an uncle or a friend, that there are people that you feel like you cannot please no matter how hard you try, and your life has been spent trying to please that person. And you've realized it's futile, there's no point, I won't ever be able to do this, and the truth is, good, you can't, you won't, so stop. The only person it matters pleasing is God, because what God thinks is important. What God thinks is most important. And I hate to say it, but we waste a lot of time focusing on pleasing people rather than pleasing God, which means that we are choosing to appear impressive rather than to be authentic. We have a lot of gold rings that we use to try to cover up how gross we are or how inadequate we feel. Having an immaculate or put together house takes priority over the relationships in that house. Being the go-to guy at work takes priority over being a godly father and a godly husband. Telling people what they want to hear or letting them gossip and vent to us takes priority over discipling them. Spending money on luxuries in life takes priority over ministering to people in need, because we want to appear impressive rather than be authentic, rather than pursue godliness. And that's not even to mention how much time we spend trying to please ourselves and convince ourselves that we are not inadequate. If we want to live successful, godly lives, then our focus has to be on pleasing God, not people, and if our focus is on pleasing God and not people, that will lead us then to be authentic rather than to appear impressive. When it comes down to it, focusing our efforts on pleasing men instead of pleasing God, it's just silly. And I want to give you 3 reasons why it's silly to try to please men and not God. And maybe this will just give you motivation and give you just that added nudge to say, I need to focus on pleasing God. But it's just silly. And when we think about it, the first reason is that people change and God doesn't. It's silly to try to please people because they change and God doesn't. People change their minds all the time. Do we really want to spend our effort on pleasing someone or impressing someone who might change their opinion tomorrow? Because people change. I remember when I was in high school, it was one of those, we grew up in a family where my mom and dad did the best they could, but we tended to get the new things after they weren't new. And I remember when I was like 11 or 12 years old, it was really, really popular to have jean jackets, not just for girls, but also for guys. You maybe remember this phase where everybody had jean jackets. And so I really wanted a jean jacket. I wanted to be just like everybody else and have that. And I think I got it like 3 years later when they finally got it for me. And it was only a girl thing by then. It wasn't everybody that had those jean jackets. And man, did we waste a lot of energy and effort in trying to meet people where they were at and please people with those with jeans. Jean jackets it doesn't need to be a style anymore. But one thing I am glad for though, and ladies, I'm sorry, it's nice to be a guy because basically jeans and a t-shirt is never going to go out of style. We can wear jeans and a t-shirt every era, whenever we want, and we will be golden. Ladies, you have to just keep up with what's going on. And it feels like a wasted effort, doesn't it? To try to keep up with, okay, what's going to please people now? And some of that stuff is just ridiculous. But Kate and I have been doing the whole house hunting thing. And when you really like look at houses, you become very aware how people keep changing their tastes based on the eras and the styles, right? And I won't point any of them out because there are probably things that you installed in your homes when you first got them that now you're thinking, what in the world were we doing when we put this in there? Or if I were to look at your home, I'd think, ooh, okay, right? We'll just say carpet and walls, right? When we look at those things, we think, man, this stuff changes, doesn't it? It changes after time, and no longer do people want those things. People change. Opinions change. God doesn't change. Do we really want to spend that time and that effort to impress someone who might change their opinion or their mind tomorrow, including myself? I might change my opinion and my mind tomorrow. It's an exhausting idea to go your whole life to try to impress fickle people, fighting for that approval that you might lose tomorrow for no reason. The truth is this: God doesn't change. What pleases God doesn't change. You can count on that. You can develop your life around who you are, around what pleases God, because it will always please Him. It will never change. Micah chapter 6:8 gives us a good start. Micah 6:8. God has shown you, O mortal, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. That will never change. If you build your life around that, you will always please God. It will never change. Later on, you saw it a moment ago in Matthew chapter 22, Jesus says very much, this is what clarifies will please God. And you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. It's the first greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. You build your life around what pleases God. It will never change, ever change. And the person who does that, who builds their life around pleasing God, will be an authentic, godly person. Romans chapter 12, you've maybe heard these verses before, but Paul, the author, says, I urge you, brothers, in view of who God is, His mercy, offer yourselves, your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. But here it is. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Stop putting on your gold rings. Stop trying to dress up a pig. Instead, be transformed in who you are by the renewing of your mind And then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. You will please him. If you focus on pleasing God and not being conformed to what everybody else keeps thinking or what will please them, then you will live that godly life. People change. God doesn't. And it is worth your time. It is worth your effort in developing your life around what pleases him. So that's the one reason that it's just a waste of time to try to please people and not God. Another reason is that people want approval. God doesn't. People want approval. God doesn't. Everybody else is struggling with trying to beautify their own pig. Everybody else is struggling with wanting approval and wanting to please each other. Do I really want acceptance? Do I really want approval? Do I really want to put into the effort in pleasing someone else who is just as insecure as I am? God is not insecure. God is not worried about pleasing us. Look what Paul says in a sermon in Athens in Acts chapter 7. He says that the God who made the world and everything in it is Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't live in temples built by human hands, and he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything from us. Instead, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. He doesn't need anything from us. He's not insecure. He doesn't need approval from people. God is who he is. He's Yahweh. We've talked about that. He is the one who exists. He's the one who is. He is everything we are not. He doesn't need approval. He doesn't need anything from us. He never chooses to just appear impressive. He is always authentic, based on who he is, and it is not dependent. Who he is and how he appears and how he relates to me is not dependent on how I feel about him. It's not dependent on wanting to please me or wanting anything from me. How we interact with each other is. People want approval. God doesn't. So worry about pleasing him, not others. And what's more, ultimately, at the end of the day, the last reason it makes more sense to please people rather than God is that it only matters what God thinks. At the end of the day, at the end of everything, it only matters what God thinks, not what others think, whether God approves and whether God is pleased with me. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28 is kind of a sobering thought. It says this is Jesus. He says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but they can't kill your soul." That's men. Men can kill the body, but they can't kill your soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both your soul and your body in hell. At the end of the day, there's only one person who it matters what they think and what their determination is of us, and that's God. He's the only one that holds eternity. He's the only one that judges our hearts. He's the only one that knows us, and his is the only opinion that matters at the end of the day. What pleases God has nothing to do with your external, nothing to do with the house and the life that you've built for yourself. It has nothing to do with how successful your kids are or how successful you are. It has nothing to do with how flawless people think you are or how clean your carpet is. It doesn't, or how many hours you spend in the office. Pleasing God doesn't have anything to do with that. You can't dress up the pig enough to fool him, because God doesn't work that way. 1 Samuel 16:7, when they're looking for that king of Israel, that second king of Israel, the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't consider his appearance or his height. The one you're looking at, I've rejected him. You're looking at what's outside." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance. They like to appear impressive, and they're impressed by what appears. But the Lord looks at the heart. He looks at the authenticity and the godliness inside. What God approves of, what God is pleased by, has everything to do with our hearts. Psalm 147, verses 10 and 11 says that God's pleasure is not in the strength of the horse, and his delight isn't in the legs of the warrior. He's not impressed by appearance. The Lord delights in those who fear him, they respect him, and they put their hope in his unfailing love. The Lord respects what's inside. No matter how impressive you make yourself for people, it's not worth your time. Because you can't hide who you are from God. You can't fool him. You can't trick him. I want to put a positive spin on this. Not only does God see through your heart, but God made your heart. Not only does he see through to your heart, through everything you're doing, but he also made your heart. He made your character, those flaws that you're insecure about. He made you to be the way that you are. He made your character. He made your personality. He made your skills. He made your interests. He made your abilities. He made you to be someone significant and someone special, someone who has value. And when God looks at us, he doesn't see just who we are that everybody else sees, but he also sees who we can become. He sees who he designed us to be and the hope and the future that he wanted to give us. He sees more than just our heart. He sees our full potential and who he made us to become, who he designed. And that should matter. That should matter about whether or not we please God or people. If we want to choose to please people, they only see what we present to them, but God sees everything we can be, not just who we are. He gets us. He sees our big picture. He sees our future, and we should want to please the one who created us. And this is the question, and to gauge whether or not we are pleasing men or if we are pleasing God. God, am I living the way that you intended? With my life, with my decisions, with my finances, my relationships, with my job, am I living the way you intended, the way you designed me to be, the way you made me to be? That question alone, when you genuinely ask God and genuinely pursue the answer, will lead us to godly authenticity. God, with my money, am I living the way that you intended? Because pleasing you matters more than pleasing anyone else. With my relationships, am I living the way that you intended, the way that you designed me? Because pleasing you matters more than pleasing them. Is this how you intended me to be? If we want to live the successful, godly life, then that means we must choose to be authentic rather than to appear impressive, which at its heart depends on whether our focus in life is on pleasing God or in pleasing people. If my focus is on pleasing people, then I will choose to appear impressive. But I will be pulled away from godly authenticity. If my focus is on pleasing God, which only makes sense, then I will choose to be authentic and I will be pulled away from simply appearing impressive. So get used to asking this question. Am I doing this to please God or am I doing this to please men? Is this how you intended me to live? Let's pray. God, I thank you that we can trust you, that we can count on you, that we can always depend on you, that you never change. And that what your word says pleases you will always please you. And that we can be confident that even though we may work our entire lives to please people who change and never actually get there, that we can please you, we can live a life that honors you, we can find the authentic, godly life. And that you want us to do that, you want to help us do that, and that means that we need to remove ourselves from pleasing other people, trying to appear impressive. Please help us in that journey, God. Help us to identify those areas in our life today that we are more worried about what other people think than what you think. And help us to get used to the question, am I living life the way that you intended, God? Thank you for helping us with it. Thank you for working us, especially when we mess up and we get it wrong and we get distracted and we don't fully pursue you. I love you, God. And I just ask for your help. I pray this in your name. Amen.